Welcome to this Energy Podcast. We are here to power up your understanding of the energy industry with some electrifying topics and some stellar guests. Speaking of guests, it's my pleasure to have us join us today, Jordan Madewell of Madewell Construction. Jordan, welcome to the All Things Energy Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Josh. Your use of puns is impressive.
Oh,
there.
yes. Well, that's, both our team and marketing, really smart guys. We put some smart words together, electrifying. But it is true. These are going to be electrifying for us. Jordan, I always like to start with trying to think back to how our lives originally connected. So I may be off a little bit. Maybe we originally met each other, at a United grocery store, in the salad aisle. I mean, that's always possible.
Right.
You ever been to United grocery stores?
I just
Market
came
Street?
from there. Yeah.
So that's my go-to. If I see someone, I'm like, where do we know each other?
The salad line.
I tell people, have you ever been to Market Street? They kind of like, yeah, that's where I saw you. You're getting a burger. And the answer, I'm like, literally, I am 77 for 77.
All
Everyone has said yes to that.
Okay.
No, I think Jordan and I used to both office literally in the same office building way back when.
Yes.
Platinum Bank building. And you were doing, was it insurance services?
My past life, I was in insurance financial services.
Yep. And there's no gentleman, I think, that worked with you, Michael Byers.
That's right.
And he drives a Cybertruck. Michael sporting the Cybertruck wrapped. Way to go.
Yeah, before that he had, I don't remember what model, but it was a Tesla.
It was a Tesla.
He had wrapped too.
Yeah. Well, we're in the energy business. Maybe I need to talk to him about some of that. How's he powering that electric vehicle?
Yeah, that was probably what, 2007, 8?
It was.
Maybe
yeah,
09?
exactly. That's now 15 years.
Yeah.
Are we that old?
When you say that out loud,
I know, 15 years. When I start saying I've been in real estate for 20 plus years, it's like, oh my gosh, crazy. No, but Jordan, you're not running insurance services.
No.
At least I don't think you are.
Nope.
Tell us how Jordan Madewell shifted into kind of the construction development industry that you're now kind of running full steam ahead.
I would almost say I just fell back into it. I'm a third generation contractor. My father did it in the Amarillo area before he moved down here. And then my grandfather did it really since the 50s, 60s. So it's all I knew growing up. They didn't want me to go into the construction business because they didn't want me swinging a hammer and trying to frame houses and paint walls and doing all that stuff. So they sent me to college. I got a business degree at Lubbock Christian and liked it here, stayed down here instead of going back to the Amarillo area, and did insurance for a minute, sold that business, and quickly fell back into building materials, light construction. And within about 3 years of doing that for other people, started my own business.
Yep. What do you remember kind of the thought process as you were debating, you're in the insurance, kind of what were some of the triggering things that's like, you know what, I really do want to lean back into what I've seen my family do and so forth?
It was twofold. For as long as I can remember, I've wanted to be doing or around or have something to do with rental property. And so I've always had that in the back of my mind, even when I was in the insurance business. My first house I bought in 2007, back when you could get a mortgage by, breathing.
Yeah, that's right.
Before the financial crisis. We bought that house or I bought that house and rented it out to some college roommates until I ended up getting married. So I had that long ago. That was a dream then. But I just, we got married. We were pregnant with our first daughter, and we just kind of thought this could work, but this is another 10 years before this really works.
Yeah.
And so we just kind of made the decision to transition out of insurance and into an industry where I was at least pretty comfortable to jump right in.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how natural it was and how I was pretty good at it from really day one. And so that really catapulted my wife and I's plans to kind of make something of that long term. And shortly after doing that for a little while, we started having conversations about starting our own business. And so, it was kind of like, oh, I've been around these materials. I know what they're used for. I know how to sell them to people and what people need. And it was just a very natural transition.
I was going to ask you, and it sounds like you even referenced it a little bit. What do you think are some of those ingredients that allowed you to feel like, okay, I can sell this well, I can process it well, organize, execute? What were some of those things that you feel like you just kind of was somewhat natural, or you just picked them right back up?
You're going to have to make me think, because that was 12 years ago. I think some of it was, when I was in sales in the insurance business.
That's right. Yep.
And there was just always it seemed like a bit of friction there.
Yeah.
And so when I went into selling building materials, I took the same skill sets or training or experience that I had learned selling insurance products and just started putting it into lumber and concrete and whatever, and windows and doors. And it worked. It worked really quickly and well. And I thought, oh, well, this is pretty natural. This is pretty comfortable. This is pretty smooth. And so I just kind of kept doing that and doing more of it. But it was like, okay, well, why did the same things I was doing selling an insurance product, I seemed to do average, if not mediocre at best, that all of a sudden I was, doing measurably better.
Yeah.
And so that was an aha for me. And then just, I think the fact that I was telling you a second ago, I've just always had a passion about rental property in the construction business and just kind of being around that all my life. I enjoyed it. I just didn't know how to actually swing the hammer and do the things, then. I think that made it that much easier.
I was reading this weekend, and there was a quote, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, but it's just basically, when you're working, and I'm going to use the word work, and it's kind of loosely, but when you're working in something that has interest, curiosity, passion, creativity, the amount of energy you have to exert to get in and do the work, right? Which is sometimes annoying, but it's work you have to do. The calls you make, the execution, the emails, the follow-ups, the accountability, et cetera. But it's not as hard.
Yeah. When
you're actually interested and you find it curious and it stimulates your mind and vision. And I've said this to people countless times, and you don't always fall into what you're interested in early in life. You sometimes stumble into it, or you think you're going to like one thing, and then you look up 6 years later, you're like, I hate that, but man, I'm really interested over here. Yeah. But it sounds like that same kind of thing. It's like, man, I like this.
I think, I tell people ask me about, owning my own business, and that's a big deal. I sometimes probably take that for granted because I've been doing it long enough. But what I tell people is it's very similar to when you have a newborn baby. You have to do all the gross, the hard, the undesirable things, changing diapers, but you don't mind because it's your kid.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel about, starting that business and owning this business and growing it in this is like, it's hard. It's harder than doing anything else.
Yeah.
But you don't mind because it's yours and it's worth it, and it'll have a payoff at the end of the day. And so those are, kind of the mentality I have. And then Jacoby, my brother, he and I talk about, we actually have a poster in our office on the wall that talks about, I think the word is Avodah.
Yeah.
And I think it's Hebrew, maybe it's Greek, but I think it's Hebrew. And it just talks about kind of having a part of your life, especially vocationally, that is in tune with your faith, and just kind of that you're basically working as if it's an act of worship, and it's just all kind of symbiotic. And so I try to keep that perspective, and that helps, especially when days are hard. But we've kind of done that for a long time. So,
well, I couldn't agree more. I've found, even on the days when you have to exert a lot of time, energy, sweat, put out fires, it's like you still, it doesn't take as much as opposed to the seasons that I've been in, where I'm in something that I'm not fully aligned with who I should be, maybe holistically, maybe purpose, maybe vision wise. And I'm exerting massive amounts of energy.
Yeah.
But the output is like, there's nothing coming out of this.
When does this fruit show up? Yeah.
And so I love to hear that. Well, so tell me now, excuse me, what kind of projects are you guys, Madewell Construction, now getting to run and oversee?
So today, Madewell Construction is a nationwide, primarily commercial general contractor. And so that means that, I'd say 85% of my business is building commercial construction, ground up development. And we're doing that at any given time in a dozen states. I mean, I've got work out in the Phoenix area, up in Wyoming, all over Texas and New Mexico. And then we just head east from there. And I just finished some projects earlier this year in upstate New York, which is on the other side of the world.
Yep. Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester.
And so we build primarily in the retail sector and automotive sector. So anything you see that kind of is popping up in, a lot of expansion, quick demand. So like car washes, coffee shops, the discount stores. We do a little bit of the oil changes. Any of those that you kind of see popping up on street corners, that's what we bid with those corporations. We just chase those guys around. And so that's what we do primarily.
So this probably could go lots of directions, but we'll say pick one in your mind. And how would you say the introduction, the relationship, because, business is just relationships, serving relationships. How did some of these relationships start? How did you knock on the door, get in front of, so on and so forth, with any of these kind of maybe groups that you're now able to, really do a lot of work with?
Twofold. Some of the team members we've hired over the years came with some of those accounts. Some of it, very simply, we started doing a few, and we use some of the same vendors and accounts for suppliers across the board. And so they saw us ordering stuff routinely, and they said, "Oh, you need to talk to so-and-so." And well, if you're doing that for them, you can do this for those guys. And so it just kind of started growing, I'd say, rather organically. And then over the years, we've started going to conferences where these people are, we're able to meet them in person or take them to dinner and kind of really cultivate relationship with them. A lot of it just took time.
Yeah. Doesn't happen overnight, you're telling me?
Well, some days it feels that way, just as how much we've done in less than, really about 7 years. But no, I didn't have any of these relationships to speak of. I had a couple of phone numbers, and I was basically cold calling guys until I had an opportunity to just bid on the work, let alone win the work.
Yep.
My first year in commercial development or commercial ground up construction, we did one Dollar General.
Yeah.
And today I think I've built, and that was in 2017. I think I've built over 150 at this point.
Yeah.
And so it's just, just kind of snowballs.
Yeah. That's fun. What would you say, now that you're leading probably a larger team, larger organization than when you and your wife first started, what are some of the challenges in leading your team, building culture that it's on the front of your brain?
At the construction company, we have just under 50 team members. And I think a couple things come to mind. I think that I'm continually thinking about and trying to do a better job of is basically casting the vision of where our team is and is going, and towards the goals we're trying to hit, and towards the direction that we want to take the company with current and new projects. And so just always keeping the vision at the forefront of our team's mind, I think gives them motivation, encouragement, hope, all those things to keep working. I think equipping and empowering our team is important. You can't scale a company very well if you're not continually giving those people opportunities to get better, opportunities to grow, giving them skill sets, and then in many cases having to bring in additional folks with skill sets to help. So those are some things I think a lot about. Keeping our kind of financial house in order, keeping money in the accounts, keeping liquidity is a big deal. Access to financing when we need it occasionally, that's a big deal. Keeping our collections low is a big deal. Managing, we have about 5 or 6 people in our accounting administrative department, and just keeping a really clean set of books is important for us. So that I think a lot about. Those are the 3 or 4 things I spend when I'm doing a good job in my role. Those are the things I'm thinking about.
That's right. And I think as a leader, it's probably easier to get tugged towards the urgent, the fires, the things, and sometimes lose or forget to be like, all right, now these are still the elements that I need to keep paying attention to and putting time, energy into, because that's what really feeds the culture, the accountability, those really important priorities. But man, the tug of the fire, you look up and like, oh my gosh, I haven't even given some attention to the stuff that's really important. Well,
culture, I would add that to my last statement. Culture is important. And I think that's one of our biggest differentiators is our culture, and just building an environment, an atmosphere where people enjoy it. They want to be there. They want to be around the people they're working with. Nobody really dreads coming to work. Any of that, even though our job is hard or stressful, they like being around the people that they're around. So culture is important. And we talk a lot about the best way to keep your culture is to continually rebuild it.
Yeah.
And especially when we've gone from, in about 6 years, we've gone from 8 team members to nearly 50. You bring in a lot of new faces. You lose your culture if you don't continually recreate that. So culture is a big deal. And we just continually recreate it with doing the things that make our team and environment important. You talk about being tugged away. That's a struggle for me, probably as much or more than most CEOs is, I'm an operator. I like being in the weeds. I like executing. I like putting out fires, even though they're stressful. And so I enjoy an element of just, rolling up my sleeves and getting in there. I feel like I'm actually producing and working, and that is not always the best role for the leader to be doing.
Yeah.
But I do feel often tempted to just jump in and help. And I have to remind myself, hey, you have to be focusing on these big items instead of, the small stuff. But routinely, this morning, I was pulled into a handful of things that, were probably 2 levels down, not just one.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So
I found myself filling out some kind of, new electric application. I'm like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
It's like, I can do it pretty quickly, but why am I doing
Yeah,
this?
that's right.
Well, I'm going to pivot slightly, here on the All Things Energy podcast. I love talking about industry specific to our guests, but I think I also love to kind of ask some of the curious questions of when and how, in the day and age we're living in now, how energy has its impact on businesses. So I would ask this question. What are you seeing clients and maybe projects discussing or talking about as it relates to energy savings, energy challenges? I think that word and phrase could probably be thrown in a lot of places. Is it even a topic? Is maybe half the question. Or do you feel like that's something that you hear more of, or still pretty low on, we don't really talk about it much?
So I personally think it's rather nuanced. I think there is a segment of our population, or maybe even my industry, that really jumps head in and they focus heavily on it. And then I think the rest of the group or the industry either doesn't care, or they just think it's another cost.
Yeah.
And truth be told, I'm probably land there more times than I land the other. Is just like, it just makes our project more expensive.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, that's generally what I think. Do I think it's good and helpful? I do think there are some many positives to it. Where I have been most involved to date with energy efficiency or increasing energy is probably in our insulation, and in our windows and doors, maybe in some of our roofing products, some of the more kind of, bricks and sticks side of construction. I notice when I have built houses in the past, my own personal home even, the difference in my utility bill going down. I lived in a 2,000 or so square foot house. It was a 1978 build. and it was regular insulation. When I built a house considerably larger than that, and I put spray foam in it, and having apples to apples, the utility bill is almost the same.
Yeah.
And so that was a real eye opener for me.
Yep.
And so that's when I started going, okay, I'm sold on at least that portion. And then I've sold windows and doors for, over a decade. And so I already knew of some energy efficiencies there. And then now I'm just literally this past month starting to get an education in things like solar and things like EV because we're doing an SBA loan, and they have a whole green energy program.
Yep.
And so I'm learning, what do I need to do for there? What I don't need to do? How do we do it? Because there's basically, they give you considerably or measurably better financing terms on these SBA loans. If you, I think, and you may know this better than I do, Josh, but I think it's like if you reduce your energy efficiency by 10% or more, or maybe it's both, be able to show how you can generate 15% renewable energy.
Yeah.
And so I'm just now learning about that side of it. So I suspect I'll be a lot more interested in it in the present future.
I've always said this. To me, as a former CPA, as a business owner who's probably focused as much in our businesses and with clients on how do I increase ROI, how do I increase net income, how do I increase EBITDA, which has a direct impact on valuation, direct impact on your real estate, whatever it is, right? The only thing that I really care about when it comes to energy side of things, I've said I'm super agnostic to the asset, whether it's a spray foam asset or whether it's a efficient HVAC or a solar asset or a battery asset. Batteries are really taking a lot more attention, and we talk about that later. But it's just simply, is the return on investment and the improve in value, cash flow worth it? Because if it's not, we're not spending time on it.
Yeah.
And I think that is still true for a majority of business leaders, right? There's, maybe a certain segment of the population that gets motivated in a little more environmental way. Great. We want to do good by the earth, but that's sometimes not the driver when it comes down to bottom line business decisions. It's dollar savings, longevity, ROI. I was curious, do you see, this has been a new category, CPACE lending, which CPACE stands for Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Financing. They're loans, basically. Are you very familiar with that new kind of growing loan category? We'll call it capital category.
I've not heard much about it. I've read, I've seen the acronym, but I've never had to deal with one or apply for one. So I'm not familiar with it at all. It's
actually super interesting. And there are programs state by state all over the country. About I think most of the states have passed legislation, but it is specifically geared towards, and there's a wide swath of how you can use these dollars. They will allow you to borrow 100% financing, right? So no cash out of pocket, up to 20 to 25% of your building's value.
Okay.
Right. So it's a pretty good chunk.
Yeah.
As long as those dollars are going towards any type of energy efficient improvement. So what is that category? Like literally a whole laundry list. Energy efficient roofs, energy efficient windows, HVACs, water systems, doors, solar systems, battery systems. I mean, the list is pretty endless. But many of the states passed this legislation because they wanted to incentivize really two main things. How do we lower the drag on energy that our state has? That's not a bad thing. How do we improve water efficiency? So we've got water 100 years from now, and we're going to incentivize private capital lenders effectively to loan those dollars. And it's been a real growth area for development specifically.
Okay.
So off air, another time, another place. We're a PACE lender, mostly to try to help clients if they're looking at, maybe some, renewable assets, battery, solar assets.
Yeah.
But I've got a lot of PACE lenders that'll do the whole development stack. So real interesting stuff.
That is interesting. Yeah. Because we're like you said, we're looking for the most cost-effective way to get in and out of these projects on the build side. And then, in the recent years, I've become the operator of some of these other businesses that we're building. And so I'm like, oh, well, maybe we should pay attention to this, that, or the other long-term. and or even just some of the tax benefit
Yep.
is starting to kind of pop up a little bit more that otherwise I never would have paid attention to.
So I'll give you a little case study, and this will actually be somewhat beneficial as you maybe explore your SBA application stuff. One of the things that and again, just literally in the last 6 to 8 months, going backwards of a year, we're noticing that the marketplace, specifically Texas, because that's where we primarily do project stuff, ERCOT market, which drives the pricing of energy, and then incentivizing certain behaviors in the marketplace because it's a deregulated market. There's been so much solar installed, especially utility grade solar farms all over the state, which is great. Lots of power hitting the market. But if you can imagine, solar comes on like when solar comes on between about 8 a.m., 9 a.m. and gets done about 4 or 5 p.m. on average,
right.
Maybe later in certain times of the season. But when you get massive amounts of energy all flooding the market kind of at the same time, all of a sudden, the great news is we've got lots of power. The bad news is that power is less valuable to the marketplace because we've got so much of it, I can't put as much of value on it. And so we've just seen in the last probably 6 to 8 months, the marketplace incentivize batteries because batteries can hold power and then discharge it like an oil well, turn it on, turn the spigot on, release it into the marketplace when the value of power is the most. And so one of the programs we're rolling out with customers, because we know that these batteries are so valuable to the marketplace, is our partners, energy providers. I kind of use like a TXU Reliant. They're the big boys. They've already got their oil and gas plants and coal plants. So they don't utilize this program, but there's 50 other energy providers in Texas, and we work with a few of them where we can now go to, your facility there on Indiana and say, hey, Jordan, how about we put 1 or 2 commercial sized battery systems on your facility and we'll own it. You don't have to pay for it. Like we'll literally pay for it. If you want to own it, we can talk about that. There's a lot of incentives for that. We're going to write you a check, like a site license fee to drop this on a half a parking spot. We're going to pay you several $1,000s a year for the right to put this battery next to your facility. And we're going to lower your energy cost because that battery, we're basically going to share the revenue this battery is going to do.
Interesting.
And so we're going to be able to share the revenue in the form of a guaranteed site license fee, several $1,000s a year, straight to your bank account. And then we'll lock you into a 3-year that has a 10-year kind of contract, lowest price in energy in the marketplace. And when I model this out for customers, that by itself is anywhere from a 15 to 30% savings on their straight bottom line, which again, if you're rolling your SBA application, that's a really juicy thing to put on there. And then sometimes we'll put we used to model solar systems that would produce 80 to 95% of an entire facility's energy. Now we've scaled that back tremendously. We're like, let's just do like a 30% offset. So whatever your energy consumption is, let's just put 30 or 40% up there for solar. You get massive tax benefits, tax credits, accelerated depreciation treatments. And the savings on that on a dollar per dollar basis is much better than just putting a massive system on there. So you don't have to spend as much, borrow as much, but your ROI on that is a lot better than a bigger system.
Interesting.
And so this, what I call a combination of a solar with a battery program, is maximum incentives in the marketplace, maximum incentives for the customer, the facility owner.
Yeah.
And then certainly, if you're dealing with the government, they really like to see it. They incentivize loan programs and so forth. So it's becoming more fun as a business guy, as a real estate guy, as a finance person to go, how can I help businesses, customers, development that may not be thinking about some of these things? I'm in the weeds, right? But if I can take some of the solutions that I'm like, this is not going to cost you a penny. Would it be okay if I write you a check for several $1,000s a year?
Yeah,
People are like, what's the catch, Josh?
Yeah,
the catch is we're living in a state that is massively needs power. Like we need it, like there's no tomorrow. And so if we can give the solutions and provide those benefits, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Especially if you talk about, you just said you're losing, the sellable value of solar from where it was even a year ago. This allows you to have another opportunity or avenue to generate that, I guess.
Yep. And I think, understanding, I kind of said this again, understanding what assets, just like in the construction industry, what are the types of assets, windows, products, et cetera, that's going to best benefit a client. I think the same thing's true here. It's like, all right, what's going to really benefit it? And the flexibility of batteries and their ability to discharge with the click of a button when prices are high, and then at 2 a.m, when there's so much wind production and there's nowhere for that wind energy to go, you can literally buy power for you almost get paid to buy power. They're just desperate to offload it. So when do you charge your batteries up? When they're paying you.
Yeah.
And so you kind of create this pricing spread, and then you share that revenue with your customers. So kind of interesting stuff in the marketplace. Okay. I like to close a little bit of our rapid fire, just some quick questions. Whatever comes out of your brain, there's no right or wrong answer. Do you find solar and battery energy in commercial projects, are they more game changers or right now costly additions you seeing? Today,
costly additions, I would feel like.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. And my goal is to change the education on that to see the ROI, or else it's not worth it. The biggest myth on green building, build green, but what's the myth there?
I just feel like there's a lot of things that from my seat when I'm buying that for a client or to satisfy, a municipality, it seems like often they're more expensive and the lead times to get them in take longer. And in some cases, not all, but in some cases they're not as reliable or maybe durable. But yeah, I just feel like anytime we have to do something specific green, it feels like there's more red tape or there's something else.
It's like it's almost being forced because of political persuasions rather than what I call practical market.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah, exactly. So this answer may kind of fall in line with it. Government incentives, is that kind of vital for the green construction to even work right now?
I think so. I think, and without you getting political, but, all the way out to these huge wind farms, you've seen that stuff over the years, especially out in West Texas where we have wind farms probably more than anywhere else.
What I will say, and this will be interesting to watch, right? This is an observation, and that is because there is massive government incentives for, and really I think what they're trying to do, or maybe this is my guess, is they're trying to onshore the entire supply chain, manufacturing chain, raw material chain of this kind of next wave of energy production, manufacturing, minerals, mining, the distribution chain. They're trying to pull it all onto the U.S. shores, so we're not dependent upon foreign other governments that we may or may not be able to trust in the future. And so the only way to birth these industries, just like the railroad was incentivized and oil and gas was incentivized, is you have to kind of breathe incentive into nascent industries until there's enough scale velocity.
So you think they're just front loading everything?
I think they're front loading it so that 10 years from now, we'll have a massive industrial engine that, manufacturing supply, raw material, mining, supplies, et cetera, that can allow us, number one, job creation. That's great. It's not a bad thing. Yeah. But then you can actually scale and be competitive in the marketplace and we're already seeing that in batteries and solars. Like the cost of these assets have dropped dramatically and will continue.
Yeah. Cause I think the argument is like today, fossil fuels are still the most economically, and probably will be for several more decades, What do you think about the, I hear like if you have to replace your Tesla battery, it's as much as a car is. Like,
I think I've seen a Tesla battery
change like 50, or what do you think?
Yes, 100% battery costs are dropping. And Elon's driving that with his own, domestic manufacturing facilities where now they can produce, hundreds of thousands of batteries at a much lower cost, which drives down the cost of the actual vehicle. Do you think
it's just a supply and demand thing though? Like why would a battery replacement costs as much as the car in some cases?
Yeah, it's just the components of the batteries themselves. To go source them from China and so forth, from the raw materials to the mining, to the supply chain, to the manufacturing.
Yeah, it just feels crazy. You're like, why would I buy that car if I got to turn around and
Well, and I've seen battery quotes now 15, 20,000. So I mean I guess you could buy some cars for 15 or 20, but it's getting harder.
Yes, that's exactly right.
I've seen these, a lot of cars. I've seen EVs now selling for, 30, 28. Yeah. So costs are coming down across the board.
Yeah. Cause just 4 or 5 years ago, they were probably double that.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. You couldn't get one for close to 100 or more.
Yeah.
Yep. Energy efficient materials. Are they typically affordable or kind of premium?
Typically they're still premium, but in the last 10 years, I'd say just, really since I've gotten in the building industry, a lot of them are better priced than they have been. But like, for instance, we talked about insulation earlier. Insulation if you do regular versus spray foam, is still going to cost you about twice the price.
Yep. But the efficiencies you get, the ROI, right?
That's right.
That savings is often worth it.
Yeah. And you as the consumer of it, or you as, selling it to your client, you have to be able to show them that.
Yep.
When I started using spray foam, I'm going to say 6 years ago. I don't know exactly, but it was every bit of 3 times the price.
Yeah.
And so it slowly come down over the last several years, but I'm a big fan of it just from the utility bill standpoint.
That's right.
If you can stomach the upfront cost.
Yep. So kind of last wrap up question, and this kind of, circles us back to the beginning, and that is, what would you tell Jordan's younger self, your 20-something-year-old self? What kind of advice would you give you just as you've looked back at your journey?
Oh, good grief. I think one thing I would say is perseverance and consistency work.
Yeah.
Even when I've managed to, I've managed to be, do okay and have a little success in spite or despite of me. I don't know, but just sticking with something long enough and being consistent long enough, being somebody that's, you can trust and all those things long enough, I think really have paid dividends for me. And so that's important, of just like, hey, stick with this, stick with this. It's going to work. And then I believed this way back then, and I still believe it, is just learn from those people that you want to emulate.
That's good.
And kind of like, don't reinvent the wheel. If you want to be something, have something, do something, do your best to learn that from the people that you're watching.
Yep.
If you don't have that opportunity, from 2011 to 2014, I bet I read 300 books.
Yeah.
And just biographies, documentary, just learning about those people in those businesses or those industries that you're like, hey, this guy's really good at this. I want to learn. And, a lot of times you hear one little nugget in the whole book or the whole interview that's like, oh, that's why that guy thinks that way. Okay. And so I did that a lot, is just tried to learn about what I was aspiring to do. And then I think just trying to have a faith in the right frame of mind, and just having faith that it's going to work, and having faith that you're doing the right things has been a big deal for us. And I think, God's blessed us through that. And it's been a big deal. And I've tried to provide that for my team. And so those are 3 of the big things that have worked for us. And then I'm a big believer in momentum.
Yeah.
You get a few wins, and that kind of leads to a few more wins, and you get people on the team that want to join a winning team, and it just kind of starts to snowball. And so I think learning how and creating momentum is huge.
Man, I love that, Jordan. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for joining us on the All Things Energy podcast today.
Glad we got to do this, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for being with us today on another episode of the All Things Energy podcast. If you want to follow us on our social medias at Get Rise Energy and our website, getriseenergy.com. You can inquire with us if you want some of those free battery options we were talking about. Maybe Jordan and I'll talk later.
Yep.
Until the next time, have a great one.